Good afternoon, everyone. I run an agency called Earnest, and today I'm going to be doing a super fast walkthrough of my favourite passion subject, which is behavioural economics, and particularly its application to marketing. So, Amy, if you want to share. Okay, fantastic. So, I've been a marketing practitioner for 25 years or so now. And I would say that without doubt, behavioural economics, which I stumbled upon some 8 years ago, is the biggest single thing that's happened in my marketing life. It's changed more in what I do and how I do it from a marketing perspective than any other aspect of marketing, and all the changes that we've been through. So this is a very big subject. The apology up front is that I will be steaming through this in just under half an hour. So it's very much scratching the surface of what this subject is. Hopefully it will just be a taster for you, so you can kind of decide if this is something you want to learn more about, and there's some reading material at the end I'm going to leave you with, or it's something that you don't feel is for you. It's very Marmite. People either love this stuff or they hate it. So I'm hoping there'll be more of you that love it than hate it. Anyway, let's get started. So just as a fundamental thing, as a classically trained marketeer, my belief is that we have a strategic role in organizations, but a lot of the time our role is to help the organization that we work for persuade customers, whether they are B2C or B2C. We are in the business of persuasion, and whether that's buying a product, opening an email, a digital event like this one, respond to a text message. All of those things are about persuasion. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to persuade human beings that we've usually never met to do something that they probably haven't thought about doing that minute. So I think what's fascinating for me is how is that going for us all? Now, what's been amazing is the digital marketing tools and techniques and data that we have at our disposal, which is wonderful and lovely. It gives us tons of metrics. Some are great, some I'm not sure they really help. But what's really been getting me for years is it tells you what's happened. So whether a certain message has worked, whether a certain channel has worked, but it doesn't really tell you why. And really that's what behavioural economics inspired me to think about, is the why. What happens when things don't work, and why don't they work? So how do we change that? And just as importantly, we rarely ask, when things do work, we don't ask why they worked. It's really important to know why, because we could do more of the same and get a very different result. So, and really where this takes you on the behavioural economics journey is that for so much of our working world in marketing, we act on a premise that people act broadly rationally, and they weigh up economic pros and cons to things. And we think about that in our offers, we think about that in our communications. Now, I'm not saying we stop doing that, but we actually have to reframe ourselves, reframe our own thinking, and realize that people actually often act very irrationally indeed. There's a lot of reasons why, and I'm going to get to that. But a few big things that affect us in marketing. The people we're trying to talk to lack time. That has got worse, not better, in the pandemic. And people are lazy thinkers. Now, I don't mean that in a nasty way, but people use heuristics, they use shortcuts to make decisions. And we're also incredibly subject to a number of biases. Now, I'm going to cover some of the biases later. There are I've recorded over 175 of them, so I'm not going to go through all of those. But there are a few of my favourites that we're going to talk about as things that, if we can understand them and know how they work, we can use them in marketing. And the last point, again, I'm going to cover this could be a whole hour in its own right, is that human beings are naturally terrible at maths. Now, some of you will object horribly to that because you are personally good at maths, but human beings, the way our minds work, is not designed for maths. Now, that has a big deal when we're trying to persuade people to buy things, and I'll come on to that in a minute. The good thing about irrationality and the way that humans operate, and the way that we think, and the way that we make decisions, especially commercial decisions, is that there is predictability around that. That doesn't mean there's certainty. It doesn't mean it's all black and white, but there is a science to follow here. And behavioral economics is a discipline that brings together a number of other things. One is economics itself, behavioral psychology, and then lastly, neuroscience. Together, that provides a research-based framework that really shows how people think and also what drives us, what drives decisions, especially, as I said, commercial decisions. And this talk today is to talk to you about behavioral economics and some of the key areas that I think help us in marketing. For me, it has become a secret weapon. It's become something that, because I've studied it, because I've used it a lot, it gives us an edge in marketing. It gives you a greater degree of real understanding about how people's brains operate, and therefore how your marketing can adapt to bear that in mind. So underpinning all of this are two systems of thinking. Now, the best way of sort of imagining this is that the way that we live our lives and what we think about are completely divorced from each other. So in a non-pandemic world, when we're running around doing stuff, we are assaulted with sensory inputs. There are billions of visual stimulus, we hear things, we smell things, and that is a ton of stuff for the brain to process. But what you think about isn't all those things that your brain is processing. So there is a parallel track going on. All of the stimulus and all the inputs coming in, and there's a huge filtering device going on, and you get to focus on the things you need to do to live your life, to function. If you tried to deal with all that stimulus, you wouldn't get anywhere. You wouldn't be able to do anything because your brain would just be processing and processing and processing. So the things you experience, the things you do, and the things you think about are actually all quite separate. This framework, System 1 and System 2 thinking, was penned by Daniel Kahneman. He won the Nobel Prize, interestingly, not for psychology, not for marketing. I don't think you can get a Nobel Prize for marketing, but he got it for economics, because it actually upended the standard theory of economics and showed that people make commercial decisions in a very different way. And at the root of it are two systems of thinking. One is that autopilot. One is the thing that you do where you go about your day, and we use this term all the time. I think I've been on autopilot. But it is a very, very powerful processing engine within the brain. It processes 11 million bits per second, as opposed to the bit that we think we're doing all the time, which we're not actually doing, which is System 2. This is explicit thinking. It's where we work things out. It's where we do painful things like maths, and that is very slow. It's actually physically hard work. It physically hurts us. We actually have brain ache when we use System 2 a lot. So we have these two systems. Now, one rules the other, and that's System 1. What System 1 does is it decides in fractions of milliseconds which inputs, which stimulus, and which ultimately decisions to pass through to System 2 to handle. Now, that sounds like we're all out of control of our lives, and bluntly, largely we are. What happens is that System 1 takes over. It's very powerful. It uses a lot of set autopilot references to make micro decisions all the time, and it makes that decision for us. When it hits System 2, we know to stop, try and work something out. But System 1 is constantly butting up against System 2, take that decision back and go, look, there's a quicker way of doing this. There's an easier way. Why are you thinking so hard? This is painful. Let's just do that. And that makes things scary for us in marketing, because there are various estimates, and I saw one recently that was saying this is actually in the 90s now, but 85% of the decisions we make are by System 1, the unconscious part of our brain. What that means on a very, very basic level is that attention spans are really problematic. We all do know this in marketing. Implicitly, we do. We get it. Actually, there's been research saying that we have the 8-second attention span economy now. Now, that's a whole big thing to unpack, which I'm not going to try to do today. But the point is, obviously, we usually think that our customers and our prospects are thinking about the stuff that we're saying to them than they actually are. Their attention spans are all over the place. And as I said earlier, the pandemic has 100% made that a lot worse. So just a quick why on that system 1 and system 2, because this is actually quite important, because it starts to kind of become very real when you think about the reasons why this slightly odd and intuitively quite dysfunctional brain function works. It works for a very good reason, because we would die if it wasn't there. And it goes all the way back to, you know, dawn of humankind. We used to have to process a lot of stuff very, very quickly so that we could focus on the stuff that would kill us bluntly. And this still persists today, whilst all of our world has evolved, the technology has evolved. Actually, our brains haven't evolved that much. They have a little bit. DNA hasn't evolved that much. Again, has a little bit, but not too much. One of the interesting things actually is the way that the brain processes things. I'll give you a really silly example around bottles. So for example, if you've got two products in two different bottles, one is tall and thin and 300 milliliters, and one is shorter and fatter and 400 milliliters, your brain will go to the taller and thinner one and think that that is bigger. But the reason is, again, going back all those millennia, that it sees tall and big. It's designed to pass that into system 2, because that could be a threat. Now, okay, it's only a bottle, but the point is the brain is so hardwired to make very fast heuristic decisions that that's the sort of thing to do. So again, packaging wise, it has some weird implications around that sort of thing. So this is the kind of the really basic theory that I'll just whip through extremely quickly there. And there are tons of books, and there's tons of talks, and there's tons of great websites as well. But what I wanted to do today is focus on 5 things that I have found really fundamental to changing the way I think about people, the way I do marketing, and in some cases, even the way I live my life as well. So the first 4 I see as having kind of very broad implications, actually, and some of those kind of go beyond the communications roles that we all fulfill into strategic stuff around, you know, organization design, brand messaging, brand design, and even e-commerce. So there's cognitive ease, framing, choice architecture, and goal drivers. Those are all quite big foundational things. Once you start learning about those and start using those, it kind of does a fundamental reset, a shift, a nudge in how you think about your marketing role and how you do the actual practice of marketing. And then biases. Now, there's millions of them. They get a lot of headlines because they're quite quick and easy to kind of grab one and go, oh, here's the confirmation bias and all that sort of stuff. There's been loads happening really in the last few years with all the various political upheavals and social media showing that there's a load of biases working away. Now, that doesn't diminish their impact. They are very important, they're very useful, and they are also very helpful at a tactical level. So that's when you're doing actual communications. There's some certain design things that you can use around biases and even product messaging, things like that. So biases are useful, and I will spend a small amount of time picking on a few of my kind of favorite ones that I found useful for us in marketing. But the bulk of the session today is going to focus on the top 4. So again, Dan Kahneman coined this term, cognitive ease. Really, this is about how do we talk to system 1? How do we engage with system 1? How do we get into that deep-seated part of the brain that rules the roost, that makes things happen? Because if we as marketeers can engage with that, our brands, our products, our messages will resonate, and people will act on those. So a very quick and simple way of thinking about being a system 1 marketer is to always look at this kind of sort of trade-off, really. What system 1 loves is simple, clear language. It loves things that are familiar. It loves things that are repeated, and it loves human endorsement. And again, go back to the if we don't have this system, it would have killed us. This is still the same kind of thing. If there's a person there, it's something we can trust. If it's repeated, it's less likely to have killed us in the past, type of idea. So all of that very deep-seated coding in our brains plays to system 1. Now, actually, I think some of this will recognize that sometimes we don't do a great job in marketing. Sometimes we use language that's about us and not the customer. Sometimes it's a bit complicated. Sometimes, guess what? We're running lots of fast campaigns on multiple repeat cycles. And is that repeating a single message? Is that kind of de-risking things? Is that making it easier for system one? It isn't. So we have to kind of reconsider that, in my view. And then things to avoid: anything that's complicated. Change is difficult. Change is really hard for system one. It does get passed over to system two, or even removed from system two as well. So change is a challenging thing. And when we're trying to persuade people to change, we need to use lots of micro system one changes to engender a bigger change. It also doesn't like one-offs. It doesn't like a kind of thing that's just turned up. It likes consistency. It likes to see that repeatability. And then this sort of lonely decision. You in a system one world don't want to be the only one walking down the path that could lead to the big bear or something like that. So the way the brain works is to kind of know that other people have done this as well. So let's have a look at a few things around this. But probably the single biggest thing around system one marketing is that it is the ultimate kind of rationale driver for the brand building process. Now, in many product organizations, and for many of the clients I work with, for example, they're very focused on revenue, which is of course fine, we're all in business, but some of that is often quite short term. And actually, brand building is a system one activity. It plays to system one. It establishes very simple frames of reference that are repeated and repeated and then set like concrete, if you saw the previous slide of mine. And you keep repeating and you keep repeating. That builds cognitive ease, and that increases sales and margin because it de-risks the decision. It shows familiarity. People go with what's familiar, so that really helps. Now, that sounds incredibly obvious, but it's amazing that that fundamental thinking doesn't actually feed through all the time into brand building. There's another piece that I'm going to talk about in a bit as well, which is choice architecture, because there's two things. If you can join them together, the cognitive ease and then something called choice architecture, you actually hit both ends of your kind of marketing funnel. You really help people come in and engage with you because you de-risked it through cognitive ease, and then you make it easier to purchase at the end, which is where choice architecture can come. So framing is one of my favorite things. It exists all around us. It's an amazing area to live and breathe. And I'm going to illustrate this with a story that it's been around for a while, actually, so you may well have heard this, but it's showing why context is hugely important. So imagine it's New York. It's been a long winter, and you're a client of an agency in Madison Avenue, and the spring has come out. It's the first kind of bright, lovely day. The sun's shining, and you take a walk through Central Park back to the office, and you see a beggar sat there. It's a very sad sight. They have a bowl there. There's only a couple of dollars in there, and he's got a little sign saying, "I am blind." Now, the legendary story in behavioral economics is that the agency, of course it's the agency person. The agency person says to the client, "I'll make you a wager, and it's $100. I think I can add 4 words to that sign, and that bowl will be full of money within 5 minutes." And the client took up the wager. They agreed that if you won, he'd put the £100 in as well, so it wasn't all mercenary. So what were the 4 words? What were the 4 words that he added that completely changed everything? It is springtime and I am blind. So suddenly it's changed the frame of reference. The previous frame of reference is about that person and their particular situation, which is divorced from our own. By connecting it to the customer, that as in the person that's going to put some money in the bowl, they can see springtime, they can see the sun, and they suddenly realize that that person can't see what they can see. So suddenly it's completely changed the frame of reference, and it works. It's a lovely story. Whether it is true or not, I don't know, but it's a great way of looking at how do you frame something in the customer's terms, so that again you're engaging system one, you're actually getting decisions done. So as an extension with framing is something called anchoring, and this is where the maths bit comes in. We're just intuitively bad at maths. System 2, great at maths, loves maths actually, although it hurts after a while, but that could just be me. System 1 just avoids maths. It goes for heuristics, it goes for the shortcuts. So it tries to kind of very quickly go, oh, I don't know numbers, which one's better, which one's worse, I'll choose the better. So it goes around framing a number against another number. People don't work things in isolation, which is got, again, huge connotations for everything from political advertising to product pricing. And as you can see the quote there from Dan early, we don't choose things in absolute terms. We go for relative advantage over one or the other. So this is an interesting experiment that he did, because he was kind of going, that's kind of a weird setup you've got there, the economist.com, the economist pricing. It's obviously a little bit of a dated example, because print subscriptions less of a thing at the moment, I would say. But he goes, okay, well, let's see which. Tell me what's working. And they said, well, okay, lots of people are going for the print and web, and not many people going for the online. He goes, okay, and no one's going for the print subscription. And they said, yeah, no one's buying that. And he goes, well, why have you got it? And he thought, well, I just want to prove to myself. I think I know why you've got it. I just want to prove to myself. So he took it out. So he removed that middle option completely. It flipped the numbers. And the point is there that where anchoring works really, really well is you can look at how you can nudge a customer to buy what you want them to buy. And you can do that by not putting a price in isolation, but framing it, anchoring it around a number of set of prices that make it look better value. So when you take out the middle one, suddenly the bottom one, the online only, looks far better value. I mean, who would deny that? So by a simple switch, you change dynamics. And this obviously has got huge connotations for how people buy, particularly how people buy online as well. And then that leads nicely onto choice architecture. This is something I spend personally a lot of time doing in terms of building online experiences, but online journeys that optimize the path to purchase, basically. The problem with choice is that we both love it or we hate it, unfortunately, and at the same time. It's about getting the optimum choice. We usually give people too much, actually, because in marketing, we sort of think we should do. We go, actually, we need to give people, the customer wants choice, we give them choice. Actually, go right back to that first slide. We're lazy thinkers. We've got too much going on. We don't really like making too hard a choice. We want it to be really easy for us. And then when you confuse people, or when you present too many options, what happens just beyond pure I don't have time for this type of mentality is that system one kicks in and goes, hold on, stop. I don't like confusion. I'm out of here. This feels risky. This feels painful. I think I'll move on. So quick thing on choice architecture, because there is a whole separate piece all around this. There's a lovely study done where they used cupcakes at a village fete, and they had 3 stands. And on one of the stands, they had one type of cupcake. That's it. They had one type of cupcake. And on one of the stands, they had 9 types of cupcakes. Lots of variety. Isn't that wonderful? And then on the other one, they had 3. Now, I think you know where I'm going to end up here. There is an optimum choice architecture, and number 3 pulled in more than the other 2 combined. And so again, thinking through choice architecture is something we don't do enough in marketing. But how much of a product range are we presenting? Why are they all there? Could we even remove some? Could we make it easier for the customer to make a choice? Because actually, customers always make a choice, but the biggest choice they make is to not buy from you. That happens all the time. And choice architecture is designed to help people continue that path to purchase. So a quick example here, a brand I use, a brand I love, is Xero. So they're epic at choice architecture and have a lot of behavioural principles that they use in their business. Here's a very simple subscription service online. 3 choices, lovely. Everyone can handle 3. Tons of stuff. I could unpick this for days, but starter, standard, premium. Starter, okay, that kind of guides you there if you really not sure. Standard, that's good. That feels kind of normal. They've done a bit of anchoring here by putting the box around their most popular option. Again, the social proof piece that don't make a lonely decision. So they're doing a lot to guide people to the middle one there. And there's loads of examples. You can go and look at some great choice architects online and see how they've done this. It's not just online; it can work as well in a face-to-face example as well. So goal drivers is an interesting area because we go back to the kind of original principle here, which is that we have a slightly mistaken view of what actually people are thinking about and what they care about. Goal drivers are critical because if we really understand what's driving a person or a behavior or a purchase or a non-purchase, if we understand those goals, then we can do much better communications. So the best way of thinking about this is, again, within a system 1 and system 2 areas, there's two types. There's explicit goals and implicit goals. Explicit are kind of rational, they're collective, so it's a kind of whole bunch of people would fit with this, that particularly in, say, for example, a B2B environment, you'll often be talking about explicit goals and this is what the person wants to do. It's based around the category. But implicit goals are the ones that are often missed, and they're emotive, they're very personal and individual, they'll trigger people much better, and they're behavioural based. So as a very, very quick example of this is looking at ABS, so automatic braking system, and this is a great study done a while back on, you've got the same thing, it's the same actual product, automatic braking system is a component of the car. It's got the same explicit goal, actually. So shorter braking distance, that's what it does. That is what the product does. So what's fascinating there is that we see loads of examples where in marketing we've got a real challenge where we think actually from a feature perspective we're undifferentiated. How do you differentiate when there's no differentiation? Well, actually that's where implicit goals come in, because actually for Mercedes the implicit goal is about superiority. And again, I'm not being critical of Mercedes drivers or BMW drivers or Volvo drivers here, but there was an implicit goal. So the messaging was around superiority, very subtly, very cleverly. BMW was around driving pleasure, core to their brand, that's what they're all about, and they can align ABS to driving pleasure rather than just the explicit goal, shorter braking distance. And then Volvo, safety, security, kind of obvious, that one. But you can see how by using implicit goals, you actually can differentiate on something that's ostensibly the same as your competitors. So implicit goals and goal drivers are very, very useful. Conscious of time, so I will whiz through this now. Just quickly, I'm sure there's a few B2B people there. I am a B2B'er by trade and history, having moved from the consumer world. If you don't think behavioural economics and the emotive side applies to you, it's actually the opposite. It applies even more in B2B. Great study done by Google and CEB, where they looked at business value by personal value. They found that the personal value drivers there in a business decision. So we're not talking about buying Mars bars, we're talking about buying big software systems or something like that. Personal drivers outweigh business drivers in a business decision. So biases, just coming to the end now. There are loads, as I said earlier. Understanding a few of them can really help on some of the side, and they're just a kind of great thing to have in the armory. They're great for different communications mediums and understanding how you can use them and tweak them subtly to get some of those nudge effects. And there's plenty that are very important. They kind of go much broader than marketing because they're very kind of societal. They really drive a lot of society change, but picked on a few in the next slide that I think are particularly good for marketing. So reciprocity, this for me is any organization that's using great content marketing, always think about this value exchange. How can you provide content that actually helps your customer? So whether those are tutorials, online guides, all that sort of stuff, the help me, don't sell to me mantra is reciprocity. What reciprocity involves is that you feel a debt owed when someone helps you out. And that can be a very small bit of help. It can be, oh, this brand, there's a great video on how to do X, Y, and Z. System 1 goes safe, like it. I want to pay that brand back. That's how reciprocity works. Social proof is something that we talk a lot about and is in mainstream media as well. But we all know this. But reviews, testimonials, case studies, hugely important for social proof. And brands have already latched onto this, but a lot of the time they need to do more on this because it is so powerful. Commitment bias is a way of an entity, a human being, wanting to continue a journey and finish a journey. So this is why things like demos work well, free trials, cafe loyalty cards, for example. That's why they often cross a couple off and then hand you the card where you've got some empty ones, is because they've started a journey. You feel a commitment to that journey, so commitment bias moves you forwards. Scarcity bias, this is all online. You see a lot of this: limited offers, time limits, inventory limits. Peak end effect is something that is a big opportunity in marketing. It's not enough. So we do a lot of work on acquisition to get new customers. Peak end effect says that you really remember something from various high points of that journey, particularly the end piece. So if the end part of your purchase is particularly nice and has a particular positivity about it, you are far more likely to buy again. You're far more likely to recommend. And so this is about the post-purchase piece, whether it's onboarding and welcoming a customer, say, for example, in a B2B environment or financial services, or some kind of post-purchase comms that just kind of warms the heart of the customer that's just purchased. Because you have a lull once you've purchased something. You actually go backwards into system one, and system one starts to kind of worry that you've made a bad choice. So using the peak end effect in the post-purchase environment, again, extremely powerful stuff. So just about finished now, I believe. Yes, here we go. So I'm up on time, but why do I think this is important? What have I experienced on it? It's certainly given me in my work a bit of the science, a bit of the frameworks to help not just guide what our outputs are, what our strategies are, but also just remove some of that subjective debate. I think our profession is so hard done by where everyone thinks they're in marketing even if they're not. And how do we sort of get beyond that? Well, actually having a bit of science there seriously really helps. It also works. There is this genuine understanding that you gain of how people think and feel, and this why things work and why things don't is hugely important. And I was told many years ago, marketing, it's hardly rocket science, isn't it? Well, guess what? You can say there's neuroscience there now. And I mentioned some books. This is a left to right thing. So Decoded by Phil Barton, it's a great introduction to this. It's very focused on marketing, which is kind of where I think you should start to kind of understand the marketing frames of reference here. Some of it gets quite academic. And then all the way through to Nudge, which I'm sure plenty of people have read and heard of, which is much broader than marketing. And then the Bible, which is Thinking Fast and Slow from Daniel Kahneman. It's a hard book. It's worth it. It takes some time. And then the last thing is much more recent one, which is about framing and frames of reference. And it's a lot of new research in this by an amazing guy who's a political scientist and has got a neuroscience background, George Lakoff. So Don't Think of an Elephant. It's a fantastic book. And that is me done. So I think, shall I go to the chat? Let's see. Great. Okay, well, thank you very much. Any thoughts or questions? I've seen a suggestion for another book there, The Hidden Persuaders. I'm going to write that down myself, so thank you for that. So, Amy, I'm done now. I can't. Is there a chat that is coming in the screen? Is that you saying? Is there a way to accelerate brand building process? That's your one. Okay. Is there a way to accelerate brand building process in order to reach cognitive ease? It is always a long-term game. In terms of acceleration, it actually will go back to aligning brand building communications to the behavioural economics framework. So system one thinking, particularly goal drivers. So you will get there quicker by doing it right from a behavioural economics perspective, but it is just not a fast thing. It really isn't a fast thing. You will get short uplifts, and this is where you are engaging with people on a kind of tactical level, and you can get those short uplifts. But the longer term stuff that does take time to build and build those kind of concrete frames of reference, that just takes longer. Okay, in terms of context, adding in an emotive frame, for example, how do you ensure if it comes across as authentic? Yeah, that's an excellent question. And there are so many examples of where it doesn't. And again, this isn't not at all being critical to any one, but I've seen financial services be somewhat disingenuous with building a very emotive frame around their communications. And so the truth of the matter is that will have mixed results. So there will be, unfortunately, a whole swathe of people that would be persuaded, even though it is inauthentic. And there will be a whole bunch that won't. And they'll see it and they'll go, I reject that brand because it's authentic. In terms of how do you ensure it comes across as authentic? Bluntly, by making sure it is. So if your organization is a genuinely helpful brand, you can build on that. If you're not, then don't try it. You're more in a world of tactical nudges and such like, as opposed to kind of emotive frames. So really, there's a big authenticity challenge. And I know one of the previous speakers was talking about that. I strongly believe if you sit in a brand and you feel because you know that brand that it wouldn't be authentic, then just don't do it at all. Are these theories more prevalent in B2B or B2C markets? Very, very good question. So this started in B2C. So the behavioral economics world, retail latched onto this really quickly. They were doing lots of very smart nudging around pricing, for example, and it's been around for quite a long time there. It's been huge in public policy. So outside of marketing, it's been big in public policy making, and Taylor did a load of work as part responsible for setting up the nudge unit in the UK. So that it's been around for a long time. B2B has been very late to the party. And when I got into behavioral economics, which again is only 8 years ago now, it was ridiculously new in B2B, and B2B is such a huge opportunity in that world because it's so underused. There's so much of those biases that aren't being even thought about. The system on thinking isn't there in B2B. So it's a massive, if you're a B2B brand, this is a massive opportunity because a lot of other people just aren't doing it. Are there any differences in behavior? It's actually accentuated. So one of the big things with B2B is that counterintuitively, particularly when you have a number of people that have to coalesce to make a decision, all of the behavioral economics goes into overdrive because you've got lots of micro decisions going on in between those decision-making unit participants. So actually, it's actually more. It's more emotional. There's more on the line a lot of the time in B2B. So the only difference is that it's more accentuated in B2B, even though you'd think it wouldn't be. Great. I think that is the end of the questions. Great. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Yeah, do again, as per the other speakers said, if there's anything that you want to know, let us know. I'm happy to answer questions outside of this.